not a fan, Griffith. He's not a fan. Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here. Hope you're happy, healthy and well. It's time for a new book review today where I share some life lessons out of books that I have been reading. In the last week or so, I came down with a cold, so I didn't really go anywhere, nor did I go to the library. And instead I perused my bookshelves and decided to revisit the works of Milan Kundera, of which I've got 4 of his books here. 2 of the books I've already done reviews here on the channel. But this time I thought I'm going to read Immortality. It was published in 1991. It was one of his last books, but it was written very differently to his previous novels. In fact, this book can be a mix of metafiction because he includes himself as a character, also historical fiction, also non-fiction. There's a heavy element of this book which is fiction, and it is split in 7 parts, and these 7 parts are all different to each other. And one part is very heavily focused on his own life's theories and life's reflections. One part on his sexuality, I would assume, or his sexual exploits, although they're written in the way that it could be the characters, but I don't know, it could be his. I was waiting to read mainly fiction, a story that got me involved. I wasn't expecting to read more like his essays around his thoughts on mass media, on his thoughts on sexuality, on his thoughts about women, on his thoughts about Ernest Hemingway. So there's a lot to deal with in this book, and I know I am only skimming the surface here because there were some parts of this book which I didn't really understand. But for those of you who have read this book or know the works of Milan Kundera, please let me know below your thoughts on this book. Ultimately, how do we want to be remembered? What are the kind of images and the personas we portray in the world? And then when we die, how much in control are we of our own image or persona? And you would argue that we're not. Once we die, our own image or own reputation takes on a life of its own. And do you want to be remembered as being bigger than Ben-Hur, or do you want to just delve into obscurity? And the more I read about this, the more I thought, I'm definitely one who'd want to delve into obscurity, especially in this day and age of AI, mass media, the panopticon. This book really got me thinking about AI and what he wrote. Can someone be outdated or changed because of the current life? The story delves around certain characters, and some characters who are in the current day, some characters who are in the past, some characters who are fictionalized, and he creates a conversation between them. So let's backtrack. The very first part is about Agnes, who a professor spies across the road while waiting for someone, and he sees this beautiful woman who's in her 60s, and she gives this gesture, a wave to her swimming instructor. And then that sets off this whole idea of the whole book. Who is she? Where does she come from? And he makes assumptions about the life of Agnes. And we find out that Agnes is someone who is married to Paul. They have an older daughter, Brigitte, and also Agnes has a sister, Laura, who's in love with her husband, Paul, but Agnes doesn't know this. Agnes and Laura are 2 different people, and in fact what Milan Kundera does in this entire book is he revisits the life of Agnes and the life of Laura and the life of Paul and the life of Brigitte, and he weaves this storyline. Agnes ultimately is dealing with grief for her father. She is trying to understand how her father died and what her father wanted from her. And we find out that her father had encouraged her to take her life by the reins and live her life. Live it to the fullest. And we find out that Agnes wants to live her life to the fullest, and what she wants to do is she wants to live elsewhere. She wants to go back to Switzerland and live by herself and live the life that she wanted to live. She doesn't want to feel guilty about leaving Paul and Bridget. She feels compelled that they'd understand. Meanwhile, Laura is very different to her. Laura is a compulsive person. She's someone who lives life to the extreme. I didn't really resonate with Laura at all. I resonated more with Agnes, who struck me as someone I'd like to get to know, someone who probably thinks the way I do. But what I like that Milan Kundera does in this book is that he explores this relationship, and he explores also the relationship with Paul and Agnes, and also Paul and Laura. In through all that, we find out more about what is the message that Kundera is telling us. Basically telling us to live our life to the full, to be artists. There is a second part of this book where he takes us to a historical past, the life of Goethe, the German philosopher, and find out this relationship that Goethe had with a very young Bettina. Bettina, the way she's written, and I don't know if this was Kundera's intention or whether this was how Bettina was like, was the fact that she was very young and she was really smitten by the very wise and old Goethe. And she tried to integrate her life with his, knowing that she would be someone when Goethe died. And we find out that Bettina had written a whole heap of letters to him, and sometime later, when Goethe died, she had gone and taken these letters back and really changed them and tampered with them so that it seemed that they were in some kind of relationship. So this personified this idea that maybe Bettina was trying to find her own fame, trying to find her own immortality by integrating herself with someone who was really famous. Kundera was actually trying to make us think that there are people also who want to integrate into our lives, especially famous people, to make them immortal themselves. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? And it is up to us to determine. There's also a fictional conversation between Milan Kundera and Ernest Hemingway, and they talk about what fame means to them. And this was really interesting because, again, I didn't really understand it in the book, and I had to go and explore and research a bit more about what Milan Kundera thought about the writing of Ernest Hemingway. As I understand it, he didn't like the writing of Ernest Hemingway simply because I can ascertain that Ernest Hemingway was a journalist. He wrote things as they were, very straightforward, black and white. Whereas I think Milan Kundera is someone who likes the ambiguity, likes the grey, he likes to explore topics, who likes to think of big ideas and then put them to us for us to think about. The last section in this book really took a tangent and talked about sexuality in quite a lot. I must admit, in some parts of this book, I thought to myself, this would have been so much of a better book if the book was focused either on those two stories of Agnes and Bettina, without the non-fiction parts where he spruiks his ideas and themes on immortality and has these conversations with Ernest Hemingway. I don't think they add anything to the story. This idea that, and I wrote it down in here, I love this idea of him asking, where does our name come from? And where have we come from? Where is our name from? Who do we follow from our past? And he used the gesture that Agnes had given to her swimming instructor. And that made me think about the gestures in my own families. And my gestures is, I always sit like this whenever I sit and talk to people. When I realized that my father does the same thing and also my grandparents did the same thing, I thought to myself, there's a gesture that has come down my family. For some reason, we do exactly the same gestures. So maybe there is a gesture that you do in your family that has come down from generations. He wanted Agnes to take charge of her life. Indeed, he asks us here, as artists, don't follow the trends. Don't jump on the bandwagon of any political party that you see that will tell you that it would look after you. Don't jump on the bandwagon of a camera where a camera actually changes you and morphs you into something else. And in one section of this book, it was heavily focused on artists becoming business people. Just because there's a camera An artist might need to morph or change what he does to become a salesperson to sell his products, and in which case he sells his soul, kind of. That's how I got it. And artists become businessmen. He has this chapter on roads and routes. And a road, the way he explained it is a road can take on different tangents. We can go down a road and then go down another road, and we can explore different places that take us to different parts of our lives and questions of our lives. But then other people tend to take a route. A route is a road that takes you from A to B, and taking a route is a lot faster to get somewhere. He encourages us to take roads. Don't take a route. Don't take shortcuts. He also encourages us to think about those people who create really deserve more respect than those who rule, and not to be taken in by politicians and not to be taken in by the ruses of politics, to be able to follow our heart and do what we want to do, to create art than politics. Works of art, he says, and not wars or aristocratic costume balls are immortal. He challenges us to think immortality as us being what works of art, what of our creations that we have left to others, as opposed to what people say or believe our reputation to be. Because when we die, we really can't control what that is. But what do we give in the world? What have we written? What have we created? What have we done with our hands? What have we explored? What are the relationships that we've had with people? So ultimately, I felt that this book was all about us, encouraging us to live our life and be free in our life, to not feel shame, to not feel as if we need to be useful all the time. Don't reduce our life to just a function of who we are, but to explore our life and to create some kind of legacy. Very deep thoughts. And ultimately, when I think about this book, I started to wonder about, in this life of AI, how everything now is uncertain about who we are and how things morph online. How do we know that what someone has written is really what they have written? How do we know if someone's face is really their face? How do we know if someone hasn't changed anything because of AI? This book, I would be really interested in finding out if anyone has done some kind of research at university about the work of Milan Kundera and the concept of immortality, especially in the day, he calls it the day of the camera in the 1990s. But I would be asking, what about in the age of AI? How do we make ourselves immortal in the age of AI? Or is it all just going to be gobbledygook or irrelevant because we don't know and we wouldn't know what is true and what is not? Now, I know that I have said here on this channel that I laugh at AI, but I know that every man and his dog is using artificial intelligence and using a whole range of different tools out there to do their work, to create artworks, to read their books for them, and so forth. So I know artificial intelligence is a great tool, but ultimately, when I thought about what Milan Kundera was saying in this book, and also understanding AI and how people are using it, I thought, for a bit of a joke, I'm going to set up and ask ChatGPT a question. And this question was, if Goethe and Ernest Hemingway were having a conversation about the themes of immortality, script out a potential dialogue between them. And it was really interesting what ChatGPT came back. ChatGPT came back with Goethe would embrace legacy as part of an artist's duty. So as an artist creates. So what does an artist's legacy consist of. It could be their poetry, it could be their works of art, it could be their YouTube channels, it could be the books that they've written, it could be the tapestries that they've created, it could be the sculptures that they've made, it could be the pottery that they've created. So what is the legacy? And that is what Goethe would want. Whereas Hemingway, according to ChatGPT, would reject fame as artifice because to Hemingway, he focuses on the truth and the experience, and he's wary of the myth post-death. So one designed immortality through legacy, and the other one really dodged it because really you can't control what people think about you after you die. It's going to be really interesting because in the age of AI, we can create personal avatars and we could preserve our memory in these potential avatars. These avatars then would persist post-death. And these avatars then would become symbols or tools that, or even a bot or a personality that can continue on and on and on. Is that true immortality? I would say no. In some way, I actually would agree with Goethe's way of thinking. It's just really interesting when you read a book nowadays, and I'm saying when you really read it, it's still brought up lots of questions about the theme of immortality and when we die, the legacy that we create, how it is to live in this life. And I think it just becomes even more and more evident how important it is to still maintain our humanity, to still be human, to still think and do things the way we really know how to do, and to use these tools like ChatGPT as just functions of utility. They're not going to last and create the works of art for us. They're not going to have that something, the being, and they're not going to have that importance anymore. You can put the ideas of immortality and Milan Kundera into ChatGPT, but ultimately you still have to read the book yourself. You still have to try and struggle with it. You still have to do your own research. You still have to make your own assumptions about what he's trying to say based on your own life's experiences and the other books that you've read and the other things that have come across your life for you to make that connection. You could put it into ChatGPT and it could churn out a potential lie to you or a thing that makes you trigger something. But ultimately, you could still have that same trigger by reading a book and thinking about that trigger in your own way. I hope I explained myself. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching. Bye for now.